Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first World Discord podcast of the new year. I'm one of your hosts, Brian Endless, and who are you?
I am the other one of your hosts, Joel Ostrow, and we have been away for a while.
We took a little break. It's not like the world didn't have Discord, but we needed a little
Or
bit of extra.
podcasts.
It's true. So
Yeah.
you had plenty of opportunities. If you were
Yeah.
waiting just for us, we apologize, but we are now
I
back.
feel sorry for you.
We're going to take at least a few episodes at the beginning of the year and cover a specific topic, and it's not going to be just one place in the world. We want to start the new year by talking about fascism. It is a word that is thrown around a lot, whether it is in politics or in the news or just from individuals, and we tend to use it very imprecisely, and everybody means different things by it. We want to run through what fascism actually is in a political and academic sense, and then maybe talk a little bit about how it's used. And then in future episodes, we'll look at some specific instances and whether they are, aren't fascism and how they qualify. So we're going to try to put some details on this as we go. I think we're going to start with Joel talking to us a little bit about other forms of government. When we talk fascism, we need to talk about it in comparison to other things. So we're going to start with democracy or representative democracy, and then we're going to look at authoritarianism and totalitarianism. We'll look at how those are different from fascism, and then we'll define fascism and get into some details. Joel, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I just want to add to that. We both teach about political systems. I actually don't know all of your course.
Fascism comes up once or twice, yeah.
I'm teaching a course this semester on democracy. I've taught courses on dictatorship. I've certainly taught courses on the Soviet system, so totalitarianism. And so Brian and I both deal with the definitions and the meanings and the workings of various political systems. And let's kick it off with democracy. New semester just started, and we always start with like just one day on classical democracy, the Greeks, which was direct rule by the people or by the citizens anyway.
The few people, the very few.
And then the first full week, we talk about a republic. And during that week, I warn the students, like, look, when you're talking about democracy, anyone who says, oh, well, we're not a democracy, we're a republic, tell them to go fuck off, because this is what democracy is in the modern world. We are republics. Or as you put it, representative democracy.
Yeah, no, let's actually talk about that for a second, because this comes up all the time. It's one of the most common critiques that I see on the internet, that we're not a democracy, we're a republic. Yeah, okay. There are many different types of democracy that are out there. They all involve rule by or for the people. And whether we call it representative or Republican democracy, it's still democracy.
It's democracy, yeah.
We don't
and
have
the essential underpinnings of a republic, certainly extending from Enlightenment political theory and philosophy, is the rule of law, and that nobody is above the law.
Right. Well, I think the other key is
before the law.
Yeah, no one has direct democracy now. And when people are trying to critique, for some reason, democracy versus republic,
they have some other
they're
agenda.
assuming that it's direct democracy. It's not. That doesn't.
Or they have some other agenda, Brian. Usually,
that's 100%. Yeah, you're absolutely right. But they've been taught that, and that's just not true. Republican is representative, is democracy.
So, and you're absolutely right. There are as many versions of democracy, varying by the different components that are possible. We don't want to make this a whole episode on democracy. Our focus is on non-democracies, and the problems with our own is the reason we're doing this. When I've published on it, the definition I adopted that tried to capture something universal extended from the understanding that any community at some point or another features conflict over how to resolve problems.
Mhm.
right? That's the reason we have government. We have problems that come up, and then the problem of security arises from different ideas for what is right and proper and best to do in the
Right.
face of those problems. So democracy, as I defined it, is a set of political and governing institutions designed for the peaceful resolution of conflict in society.
Good.
And that can
Yeah,
take a number of forms,
I go with the
rather than mandated or drop down from on high, right?
right,
Deliberative. That's and then what does peaceful mean, right? But
right.
it
I
encompasses
tend to
the
go
rule of law.
bigger
And
picture. So I think it's good that you've got the more granular detail there. Literally, I just start with democracy is government by and or for the people.
sure.
And it is the who is
Thank you,
benefiting
Abraham.
from government. Yeah, exactly. Who is benefiting from government, but you're absolutely right that there's more to it than that, in the same way there's more to fascism than the base definition.
But what's critical is um, we people, the media. This was my enormous frustration throughout the 1990s and early 2000s when it came to Russia. Um, Elections are not equivalent to the word democracy.
Right.
Democracy is not equivalent with the
No,
word elections.
exactly.
If you are only participating in your politics once a year, once every 2 years, once every 4 years, you meaning if the people are only having a voice
Right.
once a year or once every 2 years or once every 4 years, that's a place that has real political problems. And the
Yeah.
more we move towards that, the less democratic a place is, the less stable a country's
As
democracy
far,
is, or
as far as
healthy
I
democracy.
know, every authoritarian system, at least since World War II, has elections every 4 or 5 years.
Right,
And
right.
they
So
quote unquote validate or legitimate themselves through those elections. That doesn't make it democratic.
necessary but not sufficient condition,
Correct.
right?
Yep.
And when I was writing about Russia, right, part of the problem was everyone was so focused on elections and all that transitions to democracy garbage in the
Yeah.
literature that was up around then. Like, my I lampooned it as saying, that literature amounted to elections, poof, democracy.
Right.
And
And
so,
let's kind of I want to transition, but you just
yeah,
made me think about one of the ways I define it, because I talk about democracy a lot in my Africa class, where there are 55 countries and different levels of authoritarianism and some fledgling democracies that are coming up. Beyond elections, to me, the United States Constitution is actually a great depiction of democracy, whether we follow it or not. What democracy really needs is what we have guaranteed in the Bill of Rights. So you can't
yeah,
have a real functioning democracy if you don't have those things in the Bill of Rights. Okay, nobody
yeah,
else has the Second Amendment. That's a unique one to the United States, but all of the others are required for functioning
yeah,
democracy.
for sure, right? Because they define the requirement of equality before the law, rule of law,
Exactly.
freedom, basic rights and freedoms and liberties, again, which all basically extends from Enlightenment
Yeah.
philosophy. Freedom of speech, religion, association, assembly, freedom, freedom of
Yeah.
thought, all those things. So that's democracy. The other big term and is dictatorship, which we can understand as the diametrical opposite of democracy. This is something really interesting, Brian. When I was writing my book, The Consolidation of Dictatorship in Russia, I had a sabbatical. And one of the first things I wanted to do was go to get Barrington Moore's definition of dictatorship,
Uh-huh.
because he wrote The Social Origins of Dictatorship and
Right.
Democracy.
Classic definition of the
And there is no
dictatorship.
definition of dictatorship in that book. And it surprises
Interesting.
everyone who knows about that book.
The book
And
is
then
like this thick.
and almost my entire sabbatical was spent trying to find in the political science literature a definition of dictatorship. And guess
And
what?
not one.
They were all not democracy.
Okay.
There were negative definitions, but there was no definition. This is what dictatorship is. So what I came up with was when how politics are conducted in a society is determined by the personal predilections of an individual, that political system is a dictatorship. Because, again, I was writing about the consolidation of Putin's dictatorship in
Right.
Russia.
Right.
the Constitution didn't change. The Constitution was
Right.
a beautiful document, but the problem with that Constitution was it looked like they were moving towards democracy because
Right.
Yeltsin kind of wanted that.
I've
And
said since I
Putin
first
used the
read it,
same things.
yeah, I've said since I first read it in the 1980s, the Soviet Constitution is the greatest Constitution ever written.
Yeah.
It,
Yeah.
it was not followed, but wow, if that we followed that Constitution, I'd love to be in that country.
Except it didn't do some of the critical things that any democracy needs,
Right.
like have checks and balances,
Yeah.
independent judiciaries and courts. It did not
Right.
have the rule of law
So
or equality before the law.
tell me though, let's get back to dictatorship for a second. I
Yeah.
like your definition. How do you distinguish it from authoritarianism?
So that to me is gradations.
Yeah.
The thing, maybe dictatorship is a subset of authoritarianism because
That's
dictatorship's an
why I put it.
individual, but authoritarianism can be oligarchy. It can be a clan network. It can be a monarchy. Like authoritarianism is where there are rulers rather than citizens, rulers and subjects rather than
Yeah.
citizens, and it can take many forms. So I see
Right.
authoritarianism is a broader version of it, and there
Yeah.
can be more or less authoritarian versions of democracy, of course, as we know.
And I'm in the same place, so that's good. Authoritarian dictatorship, I absolutely see it as a version of authoritarianism. It's the version with one human in charge instead of a group of some type or a party of some
Yeah.
type in charge. I also think it's important to say there are weak authoritarian systems and strong ones, and weak dictatorships and strong ones. There are
weak
some
democracies and strong ones.
Exactly, yeah. There are some complete and utter dictators out there with massive control over their countries. You look at North Korea with Kim, you look at Rwanda, which I study a lot, with Kagame, and there are also dictators who are struggling in authoritarian systems who actually have competition. And then the worst of them have open civil wars and open rebellions. So there's all sorts of different levels we can talk about here. But we won't.
Really, what we're talking about for the rest of this episode is going to be variations on either authoritarianism or dictatorships.
Yeah.
And certainly when we get to fascism, and maybe we'll agree or disagree on what it's a subset of. But point is there are as many types of authoritarian regimes as there are types of democracies. They vary,
Absolutely.
but the key feature is to me that there are subjects rather than citizens in authoritarian regimes.
Yeah. No, absolutely, I agree. Are we ready to move to fascism, by the way?
Did you want to cover totalitarianism? Those are
Yeah,
pretty rare.
give a quick totalitarianism. Go ahead.
So fascist regimes can be totalitarian as well. So there's there's overlap between a lot of these concepts.
Yeah.
Totalitarianism to me means rule by fear, arbitrary rule and rule by fear, where the society becomes atomized because there is no way to stay safe. The regime has created this atmosphere of turbulence as a means of control, whereby there are no steady rules of the game. Stalin's system and the way he consolidated his regime was really the classic example because he first labeled the left as enemies of the state, enemies of the people, enemies of communism, had them all wiped out, the Trotsky and the left, and then attacked those who were right-wing communism as being enemies of communism and enemies of the state, and wiped them out. And it was just arbitrary who he was going after, who got in trouble. There was no way. There were no known rules to follow because the rules were always slippery.
Yeah,
and again, that applied to media, control over the economy, business. Like nothing was safe from the regime.
Right. And again, I agree with what you said at the beginning. This is another variation. So many dictators are totalitarian. There are some that are less so and some that are more so, and completely agree that Stalin.
And they are not all fascist.
Right, exactly. No, many of them are not fascist, actually. And
Right,
take the
the
Soviet
Soviets were
Union.
not fascist.
Right, the Soviets versus the Nazis in World War II. It was absolutely not. It was totalitarianism against fascism.
And as Hannah Arendt, she both of those regimes were totalitarian.
Right.
Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union, they were both totalitarianism. One was fascist, one was communist. They were both authoritarian.
I want to say I love these discussions, and we've heard from readers about these. One of the reasons that this type of discussion, that Joel and I tape this kind of discussion, is this is the stuff you don't get on TV. This is the stuff you
Correct.
don't get on radio, is the nuance that goes with it. These words are thrown around uncritically. We could spend much more time on each of these words. We're just covering the basics, and then we're going to spend several episodes doing fascism. But that's what we're trying to do here, is show the depth, even if we don't get into every nook and cranny of each thing.
But it's more than that. Like, as Orwell so beautifully laid out in 1984, when words don't matter, when words no longer have shared meaning and understanding, when there are entities in society that are trying to undermine
Mm-hmm.
the meaning of words, there is an agenda there that is not in the interests of the people at large.
Absolutely.
And there are problems with the use of all of these terms right now in our society, but
Yep.
particularly around fascism. It does and has to mean something. And
Right.
and we've talked in other contexts about genocide. That's another word that needs to mean something, or it doesn't,
100%.
like, it's not all bad things. There are
Right.
other bad
All
things.
war is not genocide. All killing is not
Correct.
genocide. Yeah.
Yeah, man. All not
Absolutely.
nor are all bad things genocide. So
Yeah. Yeah. And
yeah,
this is
so
one of the things. This is one of the things that gets to both of us, and I think to most observers who look at this critically, is we are in a quote unquote post-truth society. We're in a post-definition society. Things can't be completely subjectivist. And
right.
I would suggest the single biggest problem here is something you touched upon. When we get to the point where we're not using the same words, and where we have different definitions, we're there because somebody's profiting, somebody's
Yeah.
benefiting, somebody in power wants us to be fighting and be confused. And that's a lot of what is going on right now, whether a lot of it is purposeful word use, and some of it is just things that are pushed out that people pick up and use. So words are definitely important. I agree with that.
And we're having this conversation because uh, the word fascist has come up in relation to MAGA,
Mm-hmm.
because there are clear elements of and tendencies and methods that are fascist.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
they
In the
are,
first,
and like I said, the words have to have meaning. So
yep.
yeah, we can.
Yeah,
So
and I would say in the first Trump regime, there were many people who were opposed to Trump who would argue that he was trying to be an authoritarian, and there's some evidence for that, but there's also evidence that there were people in his administration holding him back.
yeah,
Now, with the second Trump regime, we don't really talk about authoritarian; we talk about fascism
yeah.
more as that specific type of authoritarianism. Well, why don't we get into that? Let
You've
me
got a
start.
definition you want to read from
I
ChatGPT?
have a definition, because if not, we're going to get nailed on the internet, and somebody's going to say, well, it's so simple. Just Google it or just look up the
Yeah.
definition. So I Googled it, and Merriam-Webster came up first. And let me give you
Uh-oh.
the Webster's Dictionary definition. By the way, as academics, it's our responsibility to disagree with with the dictionary. So we'll take a look at it and see what else is there. Fascism, a populist political philosophy, movement, or regime that exalts nation and often race above the individual, that is associated with a centralized autocratic government headed by a dictatorial leader, and that is characterized by severe economic and social regimentation and by forcible suppression of opposition. That's not bad. That's a good
It's not
start.
bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It is a good start. What would you add to that? Or maybe forget the ad. Do you disagree with any of? those elements in that definition.
I don't particularly disagree. It doesn't have to be a dictatorial leader the way we've defined it. It can
Yeah,
be authoritarian. We've
yeah,
seen a lot of fascism is based around that one dictator, but the dictator has more and less power. Is the dictator surrounded by a oligarchy, or is the dictator the powerful one? So I think there's
I
some
agree with
nuance
that.
to be had in that. I think we have to define race, and race and ethnicity should very much go together here. I think fascism clearly exalts the nation. I think it clearly looks at or counts on economic and social regimentation and on suppression of opposition. So I don't disagree with anything there. And there's some nuance, but I think there are things we can add to it. How about you?
Yeah, like I almost think that my disagreement is a critical factor that it leaves out, um,
Which is,
which is mobilization around hate for some other ulterior motive by the fascist leaders.
yes. Yep. I've heard that in other ways referred to as part of the cult of personality. And that's one
Yep,
of the
kind
things
of
that
personality cult.
is
Yeah,
almost always there. The cult
yeah.
of personality that pushes hate often toward those other ethnic and racial groups. So, if you want to look at this in the United States, let's go to Nazi Germany. Actually, you want to look at it in Nazi Germany, it is Jews, it is gypsies, it is communist, it is leftist, it is Roma, it's all the other people that were persecuted. You can look at it in
As
Italy, you can look at it in
scapegoats,
Spain
right?
as
As
scapegoats,
scapegoats
100%.
in the name of the pursuit of some other objective, right?
Yeah, and often
The Nazis' objective was not to eliminate Jews or gypsies, right? They
correct.
had other objectives. They mobilized the population
Yep.
around that hate and scapegoating
Right. It is
for other
typically,
problems.
possibly always, correct me if this is wrong on always, it's in the name of the people. It
Yeah.
is usually a populist movement. Germany, it was the Volk, VOLK,
Yep.
and it was in their name. This is why these things are pushed. The nationalism is pushed for a nation of the people. And the people doesn't mean all the people. The people means a specific type of people, which can be unique to whatever fascist government and fascist society we are talking about. But that's an incredibly important piece.
And I do think um, it is nationalist, centered around the nation. The targets are other nations. You can call it ethnic groups, cultural groups, religious groups, national groups. But, uh, there are, uh, if it's targeting, I don't know, a political group, a political party, or that kind of like, that's not necessarily fascist.
Right.
Fascists can target party opposition, but a regime that's centered around targeting parties is not necessarily fascist.
No, and actually,
Putin's Russia does that, but it's not fascist.
right. I don't think there's a lot of party because party is more political and fascists tend to go more for societal
Yeah,
issues. So
yeah,
when you've got on the populist side of fascist regimes, populists don't really talk about party other than it's one of the things that helps them at the beginning organize. They're forming their own group
yeah,
and they want to
yeah,
see society as a us and them society. You are with us or you are one of them is the
yeah.
key. We are more important. One of us is more important than all of them. Was both Italian and I'm sorry, Spanish is where it started in fascist Spain and then picked up by Nazi Germany.
But there are key things, right? There's a whole slew of what I understand to be, and what Hannah Arendt and Eric Fromm and Tim Snyder identify as necessary components of fascism that
Mhm.
Merriam-Webster definition absolutely leaves out, like defining features. I would want to start with the populism, because Bernie Sanders' brand of progressive democracy is populist.
Mhm.
Um, Populism is not equated with fascism.
No,
Fascism is populist, but it is focused around grievance and blame and anger
right.
populism
And,
rather
and,
than
and
hopeful populism.
this is often expressed as either authoritarianism or populism from the right versus populism and sometimes authoritarianism from the left. and
But
it is a
fascism is
different,
a distinctly right-wing phenomenon.
absolutely
Left-wing fascism is an oxymoron. Fascism is not a thing on the left. It
correct.
doesn't. It doesn't. It just isn't.
Right,
Yeah,
absolutely, and part of it is,
it's
as you're
like saying
saying,
dry
it
water.
is it is at least in part, in large part, the politics of grievance, and grievance tends to have that conservative element of
Yeah.
looking back and saying things should be better the way they were, even if they weren't
The way they
better.
were, it's a folk. Yeah, this
Exactly.
glorification of some mythical past is
Yeah.
definitely
Yeah, and it's
a
often a
central
mythical
element.
past. You look at Nazi Germany, the mythical past goes back to Rome.
Yeah,
When you
yeah.
look at the myth that is set up there.
And which is odd because the Romans, of course, referred to the Germans, right,
Yeah.
as barbarians. So there
Yep.
you go,
Exactly.
right? Um,
Exactly.
you wanna take us further here?
Yeah. So there's a few other things that I definitely think are a piece of it. We talked about authoritarianism from the right. When we talk about these social groups, I think it's important to know and to think of it in terms of superior and inferior. And
Yeah,
we've hinted at that, but that is something that very much comes up. It's not just us and them, it is a natural social hierarchy. And it is almost always, if not always, set up in that form
yeah.
that we know that we are superior and they are inferior. And we might
Eugenics
focus on
messages attached to that.
100%. We might focus on some of the ways we are superior, blonde hair, blue eyed Aryans, but at the same time, the more important points are how they are inferior.
Yeah,
And looking at that, because that is what drives groups, is
yeah,
that to show them that someone is inferior to them, that they are better than someone else. There's a LBJ quote about that that's fantastic, about how you get people to vote for you and be with you. You give them someone to look down upon. And fascism absolutely gives them someone to look down upon.
and yet at the same time, right? Fascism has this built-in hypocrisy and paradox because those inferior, stupid, weak um, uh, peoples that they mobilize this hate around are somehow this existential,
Oh, yeah,
powerful, immediate threat
right.
that is taking away all the good jobs
Exactly.
and all of the other good, right? Somehow they are this all powerful financial and intellectual and everything else threat to this supposedly superior race or national
Right.
group.
And I think this goes hand in
That's the
hand with
grievance
a
part.
lot of the other things that we've talked about, the cult of personality,
Yeah,
not just focusing on personality, but on cult. And this is something that many, many, many leaders, I think it probably all leaders, including Democratic leaders, have done. You use tools to manipulate the masses to get them
yeah,
to do what you want to do. Maybe
yeah,
in a real representative democracy with goals of really helping the people, we might not do that, but people are moved by some of these psychological tools, and they
for
don't
sure.
look at things from a fully rational perspective. They get different information, they are fed different information, they have different goals, and they are taught that different goals are better than the goals that other people had. They're taught that the goals of the party or the goals of the leader are better than the other goals that they've been taught at previous points in life. And those are things that push them toward what some of us might see as irrationality, but what I would say is just different information, and they have been pushed into this place. I'm not saying it's not wrong or evil in some cases if people are being harmed and killed. I'm just saying that there are reasons why leaders have done this with human beings forever, and it is that we can be led with these tools, and
Yeah,
we're not led to do evil. We're led to think of right differently. We're led
mhm,
to think of things in different ways.
for sure, for sure.
I'll do one more, and then we can go from there. This is one that's absolutely left out. I think it is the core of what started Mussolini's fascism in Italy, and I think it has held throughout. It's the idea of private enterprise working with state control or under state control. It's the bond between the corporations, the big businesses, and the government. And it's not necessarily government for or by the big businesses, that would be plutocracy. It's rather that government, in one way or another, subtle or direct, takes control of the big businesses. It might be through threats, it might be through partnerships to show them what the right side of the tracks to be on is, showing them that something's going down and you want to be with the winners when it gets there. There are people out there, I'm not necessarily one of them, who think that the last stage of capitalism is fascism, because when capitalism gets big enough, it'll just combine with government and turn into fascism. I think there's an
I would say
argument.
unfettered capitalism is.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and
Capitalism is not necessary. Adam
yeah.
Smith did not envision. He
No.
warned against unfettered capitalism. We want
Thank
fettered
you.
capitalism. Fetter
Thank you
it.
for correcting. I call this
Yeah.
predatory capitalism. You can call it unfettered capitalism. It's the capitalism we practice.
Unregulated. It's all.
Right.
We're saying the
Exactly.
same thing.
Yeah, but it's important to
Yeah.
make that distinction from Adam Smith
Yeah.
and from other capitalism, and whether capitalism can be good again is another discussion. I don't think predatory capitalism has to lead to fascism. There's certainly elements of that though, and the more that people in economic power are controlling the country, the more tempting it may be, or the more likely it may be for either a grasping elite in the government to take control of the corporate interests, or for the corporate interests to take control of somebody in the government, whichever way that may go. But that bond between big business corporations and government for control, with the intent of state control, is incredibly important to fascism.
And many an economist in the 1980s warned against the ascension of what has really turned out to be the evil of the Chicago School of Economics and all
Oh, yeah.
those Nobel Prize winners, foreseeing the accelerating deregulation, the unfettered capitalism resulting in predatory capitalism with potential for fascist outcomes. Those warnings were there in the 1980s.
Yep, absolutely.
And
And
anyway,
frankly, well before that,
for sure.
that's one of
Yeah.
those things that starts with.
No, but I'm saying here in America, the warnings
Correct. Yeah.
started coming.
Yeah.
But I would add, like, or just to clarify, like when you're talking about the fusion, the intrusion, the fusion of fascist regimes with business, with economic interests. I think you said the big businesses, but we should be clear. Brian means, I hope, business in the very broadest sense, because it includes universities, it
Yes.
includes the media, it includes law firms.
Right.
What this second Trump regime has did from the beginning was not accidental and was not unique in history. It was
Right.
purposeful. It was laid out in Project 2025, and it mirrors fascist regimes from a century ago,
Yeah.
attacking, in particular, first the independence of academics, of the media, and of the law.
Right. And these are things that many different types of authoritarian totalitarian systems do, but again, it's the way that fascists do it. You have to control the universities so that you can control the message that the opposition might use. You don't have to eliminate the universities, you don't have to bring the universities even to your side.
Make them fearful.
You're right. You have to make them fearful, and you have to silence the critics inside the universities. And if you do it right, you don't use force, you use threat of force to silence the critics.
But you do this with the media and the law firms as well.
Yeah.
And then you get to what I identify as maybe the most important feature that Webster definition leaves out. The grievances and the glorification of the mythical past, all of the harm that they are mobilizing this hate around and these actions around, signifies for the fascists the failure of existing institutions,
Yes.
and they set out immediately upon destroying or emasculating as many of those institutions of government, formal and informal, as they can, and as rapidly and with as much of a clean sweep as they can. And
Yeah,
so
it's often
that
talked about in terms of contempt for electoral democracy, or contempt for what we call liberalism, small l,
and the rule of
liberalism.
law and oversight and
Absolutely.
accountability, anything that can lead to criticism of the leader of the cult and of the
Yeah.
cult itself.
A piece of it is, we talked about the Bill of Rights earlier as being essential for democracy. Getting rid of the Bill of Rights is somewhat essential for fascism. If you're going to do that, it is suppression not just of opposition, but it's really very anti-individualistic typically. The
Correct.
nation and the race are set over the individual,
Yeah.
which is very interesting. We'll talk about it in future weeks in the United States, where we focus on our individualism, and people who might have been really buying into that a few years ago are now being prompted and pushed into another group that doesn't look at the individual as
Right.
important. I think the other thing that's there to go along with this is there is almost always some significant militarism that.
Yeah, that's where I was going to go. Yeah. How do they do all this?
Yeah,
Right. How do they achieve these objectives? Right. And typically it's not through existing police, security, or military. Uh,
right.
the regime creates its own force
Hmm.
that is under its exclusive control. And it is,
And before, let me hold your thought
yeah,
for a second. This might be a formal force. This might not be a formal force. This might
correct.
be a group in society. Go ahead.
Correct. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Or a combination of the two, which is
Yep.
what, you know, I keep arguing until proven otherwise, because of the sequencing of events. The burden is on fill in the blank to prove that ICE and Customs and Border Patrol, the explosion of quote unquote agents in those two entities, the burden of proof lies on blank to prove that it is not predominantly from those who were recently pardoned for the insurrection on January 6th and their friends and the Proud Boys and what the hell the other
Right. Well, and this is one of those things,
nationalist groups are.
looking at it and what the critics say about this, and about that issue. One of the big problems with lack of identification.
Yeah,
First,
right. It's
the authorities
purposeful.
always identify themselves,
Yeah.
and fascism, they don't
They
identify
don't. They
themselves.
hide their identities. Yeah, they
But also,
mask.
when they hide their identities, we don't know who they are, and
Correct.
that can be a very important point. So the question of why are they hiding and what are they hiding is actually extremely relevant. It tends to get pushed aside, but that is one of the factors of fascism, of what type of people are in the militarized groups that are
Yeah.
helping to bring fear and or control the society. So it's really important.
But it is, again, right, no one of these features alone legitimizes calling a regime fascist or
No.
warrants calling a regime fascist. The Soviet Union certainly eliminated independence of universities and media and the
Yep.
law. It was not fascist, right?
Right.
And they also, when they were carrying out the mass terror and purges, um, a lot of those agents were masked and unidentified. They
Right.
were random, right? But they were under control of the regime.
Right. Yeah, there is some subtlety here. The
Yeah,
key is really the cult of personality tends to go toward the splitting of people into groups.
and the
And
messaging of hate around those
exactly.
groups to lead, right?
Yeah,
But
hate
but
and extreme
every fascist
nationalism.
regime has this privatized militia, and then the real danger, as was discovered in Nazi Germany in particular, was when the institutional military, uh, what did we say, features or comes under a combination of control by or acquiescence to the methods and the purposes of that private militia. In other words,
Right.
even a professional military can no longer find itself defending the old regime,
Right.
either because the leadership has been decapitated and replaced,
Right.
or because there's lack of support in society for what the military might otherwise want to do. That's what
Exactly.
scares me the most here in the United
Yeah.
States of America is is if there were an explosion of Americans in the streets, like Minnesota today had like businesses closed
Right.
in opposition to ICE. If we had that nationwide for a sustained period with hundreds of thousands of people in the streets in every urban area and the military were deployed, the military, I don't, never fires on its own people like that, right? Like in Egypt, the military sided with the people to get rid of the military regime and then
Yeah.
sided with the people to bring back the military regime because the people were
Exactly.
out there and the military are the people, right? That's us.
Yeah.
So, but they
No.
need, but if we're sitting at home, the military's like, okay, they're okay with this. So I guess we got to go do
Yeah.
this.
Well, and to be clear, folks, while this is a definitional episode, we're certainly getting into some things. I'm
Yeah, I
quite
know.
certain we'll be having an episode on ICE and just focus
On all of this stuff. Yeah.
on that element and on the other pieces.
Yeah.
Excellent. I want to talk a little bit about National Socialism and socialism. Do we have anything on fascism that we missed that we have to go to, or should we move toward wrapping it up a little bit?
No, I think that militarization, and the militarization, the hate, um, and the destruction of, um, I was going to say prior institutions, but the institutions that society has become
Yeah.
accustomed to, right?
The
Destruction of
institutions that
norms.
run society in many ways are destroyed and either not replaced in cases or replaced with people or with institutions that benefit the fascist regime.
And
Many
some
cases, though, they're
institutions
not
are
replaced.
informal, right? Like they brilliantly destroyed trust in elections. There are many on the left who, in this country, who have lost trust in elections
Yeah,
because of the propaganda, incessant propaganda, even
right.
though our elections are like the most trustworthy institution like in any country on earth.
Yep,
But they've destroyed trust. So that is an institution. It's an informal institution that underpins the functioning of our system. Without that
absolutely.
trust, things fall apart. So anyway, yeah, okay.
Absolutely.
National
Good.
socialism, our favorite
So,
topic.
National Socialism, this is another one that gets to me every time it comes up. People saying, yeah, well, yeah, Nazis were socialists, so socialists are Nazis. It's like, okay, people, the word is in there. The Nazis were National Socialist. It was not the same kind of socialism as
The
socialism.
adjective matters.
Exactly.
The
There was a
adjective
difference.
really fucking matters.
There's a big difference in there. So let's just define them very quickly, very simply. Socialism. There's a lot of different definitions. We could fight about it for weeks. But at a basic level, socialism focuses on social equality. Sometimes that is collective ownership. Sometimes that is reaching equity, reaching fairness inside of a society, protecting people. Sometimes it's classless societies. But the focus is at some level, whether small or large, on social equality.
But not privileging any entity in that society, which is
Correct.
why
Yeah.
we put another adjective in front of what existed in the Soviet Union. That was Soviet socialism or state
Exactly.
socialism, right? You needed an adjective because it wasn't really
100%.
socialism.
No,
Yeah,
absolutely. And that's, again,
yeah,
the distinctions are many, many, many out there.
yeah,
People keep wanting to lump socialism together.
yeah.
But then you look at National Socialism, similar language. But what National Socialism focus on is nationalism, as we've talked about, with those racist ends and that racial or ethnic purity, getting that pure state is a piece of it. The private enterprise alongside state control, and it's typically focused on a certain group of people as the only legitimate people. There is one legitimate group, and that group should have the benefits and deserves the benefits of the country.
And the regime, the clan, the cult, the leaders of the cult, they install the heads of those. Like private businesses are no longer private
Right.
because the leadership of those businesses either has to subordinate to dear leader or gets replaced with someone who is part of that leader's network and cult. So
Absolutely.
so again, we will have an episode, I'm sure, about what is going on in our corporate world in the United States of America, right? But like Zuckerberg kowtows to Trump and gives
Yeah,
millions of dollars. He stays as head of Meta.
right.
But CBS gets decapitated and Trump's people get put in charge, right?
Absolutely.
So
And if you are
resistance becomes futile, to quote.
they put it out there. If you're a smart corporate leader, you'll take the easy way and kowtow to the leadership. Same thing with
Exactly.
universities. Same thing with
Same
other
thing with the
parts
law
of
firms and everything
society.
else. Yep. And the courts. Yep.
Yep. So just want to lay that distinction out there. Before we get to specifics next week, anything that we missed? Anything else you want to talk about? You're Mr. Fascism. Joe's been talking fascism with me for decades now and looking
No, a
at it.
decade. I think I started
push
warning
back.
about fascism here in 2015 when Trump
Yeah.
came down the escalator. And people laughed. As you know, you
Oh, yeah.
laughed at me. People laughed
That's
at me,
100%.
right?
Yeah, I did not accept it as fascism until we started seeing really some of the Project 2025 stuff.
And you remember from 2015 through Trump's first term, like when I was posting on social media, the standard playbook was
Yep.
how I would start many of my posts.
Right.
And that is part of why I say, you know, when I was on with Joan recently and calling for general strike, and we need to be out on a Monday, not on a Saturday when the weather's nice at 10 a.m. We all need to be out on a Monday. And she said, we're not there yet. And I said, by the time Anne Frank's in the attic, it's too late.
Right.
So
This is,
we
by the
can't
way,
wait till Anne Frank is in the attic, because then it's too late.
this is our
And
good
I
friend
fear
Joe.
Anne Frank is in the attic now.
This is our good friend Joan Esposito on WCPT AM
Joan.
820, live, local, and progressive. So
It is, but
tune
she
in there.
doesn't listen to podcasts, famously.
Oh, so
but she does promote this one.
free ad and she's not listening.
We'll let her know. And she has to listen all the way to the end.
I'm auditioning to be a damn announcer and nobody's listening.
Oh,
all right.
You want to sign us off?
I will sign us off. Joel, thank you very much. This is one of those two-person discussions, but I hope you've got a lot out of it. We are back. We're going to be doing fascism as long as...
We're going to be doing fascism as long as they're doing fascism.
And as long as, of course, we're allowed to do fascism.
We're doing fascism. I'm also teaching genocide this semester. Are you teaching genocide?
I'm teaching genocide next semester. So I get a little break from it this semester. All right. Thank you, folks, for tuning in. Thank you, David, for producing. And we will see you all next week. Have a good one.
See you next time.